Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us from wherever you might be at today. I'm calling in from DC. It's so beautiful here. All the spring weather. Not too hot yet, but it's lovely, especially considering everything happening in DC these last few months. I am Julie Montgomery, and I'm the Vice President of Membership and Partnerships here at SID-US. Please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Um, we'd love to know your name, where you're calling from, um, and if you're a SID-US member, how about that? Because I know this is an open public event, so you may be just coming to a new your first SID event. So for those that are new to SID-US, we are a network of individuals and organizations working in international development. We're a neutral convener representing people from all parts of their career. And we represent different types of organizations such as NGOs, universities, the private sector, think tanks, small businesses, and more. We welcome you for today's event, Hunt Like a Hero, Apply Like a Scientist, a practical guide to finding your next job in the new social sector. As we all know, this year has been so challenging for many people and thousands of international development professionals all around the world. Many of you are still just scrambling to figure out how to survive, when your career was basically your job was pulled out from under your feet. Um, that said, we are a resilient community and, I believe that each and every one of you will land somewhere eventually. Um, we at SID have also have been impacted. We're half the staff, sadly, than we were earlier this year. But we try to hold these events for the community because we hear from our members that they need us even more than ever to convene them and provide resources and tools and spaces for you all to connect. Although we've had to postpone or cancel our large scale events, such as our annual conference, we continue to provide events like today on topics that we believe the community needs, like finding the job, transitioning sectors, managing one's mental health, networking, and more. Next Monday, we're holding an event for our institutional members on the new foreign assistance landscape. And then on Tuesday, we'll be bringing international development professionals together to share their journey on how they've had to pivot or adjust their job as a result of everything that has happened. So thank you for being here and supporting SID-US. So before we get started, I just want to I have a few housekeeping points, and then I'm going to introduce our speakers. First, we're recording the session, and we will be posting the recording on YouTube. We'll be sharing the slides. Second, you can adjust your closed captioning through your settings, through your individual settings. And then finally, please post your questions in the chat. We may not get to all the questions today, so please feel free to reach out to Spencer and Dan through LinkedIn. And their LinkedIn links are on the bios on our event page on the SID-US website. So now to our speakers. We are very honored to have Spencer Campbell and Dan Freehling join us today to share some practical steps on how to land your next role while staying true to your values. They've held this session several times with others, such as DevX and Open GovHub. To no surprise, they were very highly attended, and clearly there is still a need, which is why we asked them to share their advice and present today with our community. So a little bit about them. Spencer is a recruiting expert and the founder of the Spencer Campbell Talent Agency, where he helps his clients get exactly the job they want. And this is interesting, he only gets paid when you get hired. So that's incredible. Before he started his company, Spencer had a career as a talent acquisition executive. He's hired staff on 5 continents at some of the leading nonprofits and social enterprise organizations like the One Acre Fund. He started his career volunteering in Ghana with the Peace Corps. So thank you for being here, Spencer. Dan, so now to Dan. Dan is an ICF certified coach, organizational leadership consultant, and the founder of Contempus Leadership. He's also the author of the Career Design Map and the host of the Forward Looking Leadership podcast. He's a Harvard Business Review contributor and a member of the Prime Coaching Academy Board of Advisors. Throughout his career, Dan has coached top social sector executives and has offered career strategies to leading industry associations, career communities, healthcare organizations, universities, and more. So, with the two of them, you're really in for a treat today. I know they have some great advice for you all. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Spencer. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Julie. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all despite the circumstances. So I'm going to pull up our slides as we're going through. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. So those should be up now. It's again pleasure to be with you all here. You heard some of the intros here. So Spencer is former Peace Corps. I actually worked with a number of USAID contracts. Most recently, worked for Encompass. So a lot of familiarity, seeing a lot of familiar names in the chat, as well as some new folks. And we've been doing a lot of work with people in this situation and sharing our approach to job search, some of our lessons learned from working with our clients. And it's going to be very practical, very action oriented, and hopefully give you a lot of next steps to take away that are pretty tangible, that are helpful as you're dealing with navigating this. I've personally been doing a lot of pro bono sessions with clients since this all started. So first opening up my calendar in January, worked with people all through February into March, and then opened it up again in all of April. So I've met with over 250 people one-on-one so far, and I've been hearing a lot of things that might be familiar to some of you. So everything from, I've loved working in international development. I've loved my job. This is a real loss for me. And, this is something that I'm having to deal with as I navigate this. A lot of people thinking about the people they've worked with, projects they've worked on, people in the various countries that they've worked in, and the impact of this on all of those people that they've dedicated their careers and their lives to. Some people have been saying, I've been thinking about leaving even before this. And this is a part of an ongoing job search, a career exploration for me. Some people are balancing, do I stay in federal service? Do I stay in international development in a different way? And what does that look like? So wherever you are along that spectrum, wherever you are in this journey, we hope that what we share today can be helpful with you all. A lot of this is going to be frameworks and some tactical steps. And it can be helpful to understand this really in the context of a story of a real client. Someone that Spencer and I have worked with. We're going to change some details. We're going to change her name, but want to give you a sense of what this really looks like for someone who's actually on a job search as we go through it, so it can help to ground it for you. So we worked with a client who we're going to call Maribel. Again, not her real name. We're going to change some of these details as we go through, but this was before all of the recent changes in international development, and she was working. She had worked in the private sector at first. She was in really strongly, very private sector, kind of oil and gas, making these high-level financial deals, and had a change of heart, had a change of careers, and shifted into the social sector. Started working for education organizations, found her way into philanthropy, started working for funders on the funding side, using some of these same skills, putting together these high-level deals. She was doing an amazing job with it, really making an impact, really making a difference. And her foundation had a change of direction, and they cut her entire line of work, everything that she was doing, pretty much overnight. And she did what so many people did when she heard that she was getting laid off. She jumped on the online job boards. She tried to find almost any job she could. She put in 10 applications, 20 applications, 30 applications, 40 applications, 50 applications in a matter of weeks. And it was a month later, and she had still heard nothing back. And that's when she said, I need to do something different. I need to figure out a different way to approach this. And that's when she came to us. So we'll pick up her story as we go through this, but want to ground it in a real life example to help you see how some of these concepts play out in practice. Spencer, maybe I can turn it over to you for this.
Okay, great. So as Dan has mentioned, and really just before I get into it, thank you, Julie, for such a warm intro. It's a joy to be here, even though the circumstances are tough for a lot of folks. I wanted to share something here at the very beginning that I hope you can take with you. If you remember nothing else from this talk, I hope you take home what's on this slide. Dan and I have picked up on this trend as we've talked to different job seekers and we've helped people over the years, that generally there are about three types of job seekers, type 1, type 2, and type 3. Maybe some of these profiles you see resonate with you. I don't know if you're, I would love for folks to put in the chat if any of these jump out to you as maybe the type that you identify with. We meet folks who are looking for the perfect job and find a way to say no to a lot of things. And a lot of time, these job seekers spend a lot of time reworking the resume. And the advice for these folks is maybe how can we expand the field of view? I also meet just as many people, and this is a totally fine starting point. I think I really resonate with this. I also meet a lot of people who are just more like Maribel, who's like a classic type 2, which is I show up every morning and I do I get my applications out. I'm just gonna shotgun approach. If I could apply to everything that I see, that would be what I would do. And also, this isn't the solution either, as far as I could tell. I think we, just like Maribel, we a lot of people who are just wasting a lot of time, and I would say too much time on LinkedIn is like toxic to your health. It's sort of just not a great place to spend more than maybe an hour a day. And with these folks, what we're always trying to say is how can we narrow in? What I think is the most productive way to job hunt, the kind of job seeker that gets hired in a good job as fast as possible is this type 3, the matchmaker. Um, a matchmaking job seeker has a balanced approach. It's not too broad or too narrow. And most of the time they spend is actually in networking. Networking is the pathway to finding a great match. And this approach, it asks a lot from the job seeker. I won't, be very honest with you about that. But I do think it's just the one that pays off. This is the one that we've seen work for our clients again and again, and I think it will work for you, even as you make a pivot, even as get your head around where you might be in your career, given everything that has changed. So, networking is really powerful, and this kind of match-focused job seeking is what underlies a lot of what we're going to cover today. I'll pass it back over to Dan to pick up the threads.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Spencer. And glad to see people putting into the chat of where you are and if it's a mix of these, where you're starting from. And that can really help in understanding what you need to do throughout this. So the core of this, as Spencer's alluding to, is that the job process is really a process of discovery. It's an adaptive process. It's one of figuring out where you're going to fit. There's a great book by Phil Terry called Never Search Alone, and this is one of his fundamental realizations about the job search, is that it's much like a startup business goes into a new market and has to find product market fit. You going into the job market and succeeding in it in an adaptive job search, you need to find what's called candidate market fit. And that's a lot of what's going to be at the base of what we're talking about today. This differs from a technical process. This differs from already knowing the end result and needing to optimize for it. And when you approach the job search as a technical process, as something where you have to be the best, you have to minimize your mistakes, you have to already know what you're doing and prove that you're right in that, that's where it goes off the rails. When you approach it as a process of discovery, of learning, of growth, and of coming to that fit between you and the market, that's where you succeed in this. That's where we see people succeed in this over and over again. So all of that being said, we have a process that we call Hunt Like a Hero, Apply Like a Scientist. You notice that was the event title. That's what we call this talk. The realization here is that there's two concurrent processes that happen throughout a job search. One of them is deeply personal. It's all about you. This is Hunt Like a Hero. I come from the world of coaching. This is very much the coaching approach. This is what mindsets, what behaviors, what do I have to do with my confidence, how I show up, how I approach this from a personal side, what do I want next, how do I strategically position myself to get there, how do I think about vision, all of this kind of stuff about you and what you do and who you are as a person in facing this situation. That is Hunt Like a Hero. It follows the hero's journey in literature and in film, in every story, because it's a process of human transformation. Concurrently, there's this other side called Apply Like a Scientist. So this is the deeply tactical side, it has nothing to do with you as a person. This is you treating your job search as an experiment of how do I figure out what my fit is when I don't know that coming into it? And it's all about having a hypothesis, testing that out in the real world, learning and growing from those results, and repeating this until you really start getting traction on a type of job that you're at. Again, the hunt like a hero, all about you, apply like a scientist, nothing at all to do with you. And so much job search advice is heavily one side or the other. And that's why I can feel so all over the place. And frankly, that's why some of it can not be helpful in your search because you're neglecting this whole other half to the job search. Spencer and I come from different backgrounds. I bring the coaching background, Spencer brings the recruiting background. And what we've each realized is that the other side is just as important. And that's a lot of what we're going to be sharing with you today. So let's start with Hunt Like a Hero. Spencer, maybe you can take us through some of the setup for Hunt Like a Hero.
All right, great. So bear with me, please, on some of this because I came to a lot of these ideas fairly skeptically. But the first proposition that I want to put in front of you is that a successful job hunt is like a great story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Um, it is a journey with ups and downs, highs and lows. It's a journey fundamentally of transformation, right? We talked about discovering where you fit. There's a lot of that's unknown. There are often things that need to be um, handled, things that maybe we'd rather not handle sometimes, past demons or struggles. It also requires quite a lot of personal reflection on what are our strengths? What do we really want? These are often deep questions. And it's a period where maybe we have to rethink some things that we always knew to be true. Like maybe a lot of you guys can resonate with this. I can't imagine many of you were contemplating a job hunt in 2025 before all this kicked off. I'm sure there's a lot of folks in this room who this has all been, quite a shock, myself included. The thing that I'll emphasize here at the end is that, often in the classic hero's journey, which I really feel like the job hunts that I help my clients through, they follow the story arcs of they follow the story beats of the hero's journey. And one of those beats in the screenwriting literature, they call it the dark night of the soul. There's this darkest point where things seem so bleak and so dire, and that is often the point before the dramatic conclusion of the film, before Frodo makes it up Mount Doom to dispose of the ring and all of this. It's things might feel pretty bleak just up at the point where we are about to turn it around and unlock what we're looking for. So if you are feeling in that space right now, I would say lots of people have walked this path, and uh, it may be that you're closer to the answer than you realize. Maybe we'll take it into the next slide, Dan.
So this is sometimes what we call the emotional roller coaster of the job search. How many of you just type into the chat? How many of you are feeling something like this? Are we an I hate this crowd right now? Are we cautious optimism at the moment? I'd love to just get a sense of where we are with this. And this emotional roller coaster is such a resonant concept. And there's no surprise that it also follows the structure of a hero's journey in film and literature because this is again a story of emotion of human transformation of going out into the world, seeing, facing a disruption, learning, growing, adapting, and it follows this process, and it has to follow this process. You can't skip straight to the end of a story because that would be, really unfulfilling, and it wouldn't make any sense, and it's just impossible to do. You can't just go straight from facing a major disruption to coming out the other side. You have to go through something like this, and it's reflective of what this really looks like. So yeah, seeing some of the I hate this crowd in the chat now and vacillating between that and some cautious optimism, and just know that that's normal. It's part of this process. It's what has to really happen to do this, and don't be surprised by that there's nothing wrong with your job search if you're going through this. Actually, that means that you're doing this the right way, that you're not being naive and thinking that you can just come up with a solution and get right to there. This has to be what happens. So let me walk this through with a bit of Maribel's story to ground this in some real life context. So that inciting crisis was when she learned about the layoff, right? So she She was doing work that she loved, and there was this inciting crisis. Many of you felt this same kind of a thing, right? You were doing work that you loved, and now all of a sudden you're facing this real disruption. Meet your guides is next. So she tried it on her own. She came across us. Not saying you have to work with us or follow this process exactly, but find people who know stuff about the modern job search. Find people who know what they're talking about with it, who can provide you with some frameworks, with some structure. That's what we're going to be trying to do today is give you some of that grounding so you know the path ahead. You know what you really have to do to make this successful. Facing your fears comes next. So one of Maribel's fears was she had come from more of the business side, from the administrative side, from the managerial side, less from the technical side. And it was, in looking at what I do next, can I do a programmatic role, or am I not enough of a technical expert to really be able to be in this world, to be with these kind of people? That's a real fear. And whatever that fear is for you, we have some exercises around this of facing that. That can be a money fear, that can be a prestige and title fear, that can be, am I really qualified to do this kind of work? Am I, having some of that imposter syndrome kind of thinking going into this? That can be, around not wanting to take on responsibility for something new and fear of failure. So whatever that looks like for you, it's important to really go into that up front. That can be counterintuitive for people, where there's so much around just going right into your strengths and completely ignoring what you're afraid of. The problem with doing that and skipping that really understanding your fears part is that you're going to let those fears, you just naturally have to let those fears affect your job search, and they're going to be affecting your thinking and your tactics, and they're going to be underlying a lot of this. So doing what you can to surface those up front, know what you're really facing is important. Finding your strengths. So this is not just a feel-good exercise. I know that there's, some skepticism around, is strengths-based everything just, to make yourself feel good? It doesn't really make sense in reality. Finding your strengths in the job search is about uncovering what you can do exceptionally well, what brings you tremendous energy, what you can bring to something that other candidates can't. And that is what will really put you over the edge. The job search is one of those true winner take all experiences. It's one of the last really winner take all experiences that's remaining in the world of it doesn't do any good to be, able to do a future job. You have to be able to do it exceptionally well so you can get through the whole process, go through the interviews and win that role and be part of that. And finding your strengths is a big part of that. So we recommend there's assessments like Strengths Finder that many of you may have come across, and we have an exercise called Power of My Strengths that we walk people through. That's, what do your former colleagues, coworkers say about you? What do your former supervisors say about you? What are some work products or experiences that you're proud of? What did you do that other people don't do naturally that made these possible, that made these successes uniquely possible? Sitting into that is really, really helpful in A, knowing what you're targeting, what you're going after, B, in developing that confidence to really step into it and say, no, I know what I can do here, and I know that I want to step into this. So after that, you go into Act Two. For Maribel, for finding her strengths, it was really, it wasn't going to be in the technical expertise. That was not her strength. She wasn't an academic. She wasn't a research scientist who was going to be a unbelievably strong technical person. Her strength was in being able to communicate this with other people. So with boards, with organizations, with funders, and making these connections between the technical and the people who are on the more funding side, the business side, the administrative side of things. And when she clicked into that, it was, okay, this opens up programmatic roles that we were closing down before. And similarly for you, this finding your strengths can open up whole new paths that you might be blocked from going after. And it can take you away from paths that might not make sense for you because you're not exceptionally strong in them. And this is a big part of it. Then we go into Act Two, which is finding your fit. You'll see the magnifying glass in the background. We're gonna go into this in much more detail when we discuss Apply Like a Scientist. This is where Apply Like a Scientist intersects with Hunt Like a Hero. This is all about going out into the world, braving the unknown, getting help from people around you, from your team. I know many of you have found tremendous strength just from people I've talked to of being in community with others, maintaining those connections, whether it's from your old company, from other people who are in a similar situation, from friends, from family. This is where you bring in the non-job search experts into this process, right? Other people who can help you with this. Um, Try, fail, learn, repeat. So know that in any movie you're watching, in any book you're reading, it would be really boring if the first thing that somebody did just works out and it works and that's the end of the story, because that's just not how things generally work out in real life. If it does, that's great. I would love for that to be the case for your job search. It's just not how things generally play out. Know that trying, having false starts, having near misses is going to be part of the job search, and don't take those as failures. It's quite the opposite. This is part of getting to success, is being able to figure out what's working and what's not. So this is in Maribel's journey. She had a lot of these. She got to many second, third, fourth round interviews with places. Um, we thought that this was going to be the job for her, and at the very last second it was okay, we're going to go with somebody else. We really loved you, but they bring this particular piece, and that can be really demoralizing. And know that that is part of the process. And as Spencer mentioned, this is what's called the dark night of the soul in screenwriting, which is right before you've really found your fit, you're going to be experiencing some of your hardest losses, right? This will be when things seem their worst, when they seem their bleakest. That's actually a really good sign, because you've been really going for things. You've been pouring your heart and soul into things. You've been getting close, and it can be tough to experience those. Know that that's a good sign. And we'll pick up the rest of this as we go through this presentation with you. All of this stuff in Act 3 is a lot of what people focus on up front. This all is a natural consequence of finding that fit, of discovering that true fit. So a ton of people spend a lot of time focusing on winning their interviews, on negotiation, on the offer. All of this stuff comes after you've discovered your fit. And being in the right rooms for interviews, we have some interview tips that's important to practice your interviews. Being in the right room for interviews is way more important than having the right answers in your interviews. And that's something we want to share with you. So Spencer, maybe you can take over where people get tripped up in this process.
Yeah, totally. And we've got really good dialogue in the chat. We're responsive to questions in there, and again, happy to continue the conversation with folks via LinkedIn. What I talk about here in terms of you know issues we've seen again and again. Many of us come into job hunts with limiting beliefs that hold us back. We're still fighting the same fights we were waging with our boss, before the layoff or before we left our job. We have mindsets about ourselves, about what we're good at, about the job market, about um, where we could fit. When the reality is we often don't know what we don't know. It's unlikely that in your previous role you have to be expert on the job market, on other organizations in your field, other companies that could use your skill set. So it's possible today that you have a more limited view of the world than reality. And finding ways to challenge those assumptions that we're making that potentially hold us back. On a related note, but I want to emphasize this because I think it's a huge part of it. Your strengths, what is compelling about you, is often not obvious to you, right? Folks perennially miss the boat on that because you don't experience your strengths as strengths. If you're a genius, you don't feel like a genius. You just have the perception that you're surrounded by idiots, right? Like you probably, if you're like most job seekers, you do not have a handle on this, on the strengths that you bring to the job market from the perspective of the people who want to hire you, the people who could use that skill set. This often requires quite a bit of inquiry and discovery, and it's deep reflection, and it might be experiments. We'll talk to how do we experiment, how do we get feedback on what's going well in the job hunt to understand what what could be avenues worth exploring? What are the strengths that I do have could I bring to the table? But for most folks I work with, we begin the hunt not really understanding what are those strengths in the way that we need to in order to succeed. The last thing I would say is that this was my problem with job hunting previously, is that we want to skip straight to the end. Um, you know, I get paid when my clients get hired. Uh, if I could build a ChatGPT powered robot to mass apply to every job listing available, and that would get folks hired efficiently and quickly, that's what I'd be doing. And in fact, it's what I tried to do in the early days of this work, and it just doesn't work, right? Like this path, however annoying it might sound to walk, is what I found the most efficient ways for folks to get matched with high impact, high paying jobs. We cannot skip this stuff. We cannot, there isn't a shortcut, a hack, a secret. And I think anyone who's trying to sell you that stuff is often it's a sales pitch, right? What it requires to get a job is to really go through these steps, go on this journey. And that's frustrating, that's annoying, and I when I discover this hack, I'll monetize it and become a bajillionaire. But like as far as we can tell, there's no substitute for the work that we have already laid out and we're going to lay out in the next part of this talk. I hopefully that's not too much of a bummer to hear, but I think it's important to be really frank and transparent with folks about what this actually looks like in practice. Maybe we'll move on here to this next section. Okay, this quote often gets attributed to Albert Einstein and actually is from Narcotics Anonymous. If we do something over and over again, if we find ourselves waking up every day, applying for jobs, getting no feedback, being ghosted, um, and we do not make a change, this just it doesn't follow that continuing to do the same thing that doesn't work is ever going to lead to a different outcome, right? It just doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's often the starting point for us when we're in these situations that tax us and ask us to do things in a different way. So rather than the insanity of the endless LinkedIn grind, we want to present an alternative way to think about targeting and applying for jobs. And this is the apply like a scientist method. Okay, a couple things to keep in mind. When you're applying for jobs, uh, the information about your fit, whether you get a job or you don't get a job, has nothing to do with your identity, with who you are. When I was a recruiter reviewing resumes, trying to hire an executive director or a director of impact or a country director, whatever it wasn't, is Tom a good person? Is he worthy to take this job? It's, does Tom have the skill set that I need to, to succeed in this role? Do I think Tom is going to sign the offer, stick around, and crush the work that's put in front of him? It isn't what you do. The jobs that you go out for don't have anything to do with who you are. How much money you make doesn't have a thing to do with who you are. Your job title isn't who you are. These are things that are separate from you. And so when you're getting feedback from the job market, I would just entreat every one of you guys to take it with the distance that the recruiting team has, right? We are talking about fitness for a certain role, not anything that has to do with you. On a related note, I think this is an important message because often feedback or lack thereof in a job hunt can be so frustrating, right? We get sort of a stock thanks but no thanks, or we get ghosted. We do all this work and nobody ever tells us anything. But they don't actually have to tell you anything. What they say is not nearly as valuable to you as what they do. Um, the people who return your calls, the people who ask you to interview, that is the only signal that you need in order to figure out what to do with your job hunt. And the final point here is that this process is iterative. I don't know today, without knowing you, without going on this journey with you, where you should belong. It's unknowable. We need to discover it through an iterative learning process. It takes time, it takes action, it takes analysis. So in this process, we'll talk about what are those steps? How do we do that analytical work? How do we figure this out? Okay, Dan, let's maybe jump into the next slide and we'll go through this. Okay, so after we've done the reflective work in part one, in Act 1, we arrive at the apply like a scientist cycle in Part 2. So it starts like any scientific inquiry with hypotheses. We want to identify where could we fit in the job market. I think I could be a proposal manager at a large nonprofit. I think I could be a product manager at a socially impactful tech company. I think I could be a country director at a nonprofit organization with foundation donors, was not dependent on funding from USAID, and so is still hiring. That's just the beginning, right? It does not launch into job applications for those roles immediately. We want to validate this with networking. We want to see is our hypothesis on the right track? And we'll go through like what are those questions? We'll give you a list of questions here in just a couple slides that you can ask to uncover this. This networking, sometimes jobs will reveal themselves in that networking. This has happened again and again. We get people in the right rooms with the right connectors, they're loose ties, folks in their network, on these low stakes conversations where it's not, I'm beating down the door, hey, can you introduce me to someone at Gates Foundation? It isn't that. These are fact-finding conversations. Phil Terry calls it the listening tour. You are coming into these questions with curiosity about where you could find your fit. Is there reason to believe that your hypothesis might be on track, or maybe we need to refine it? It's only at this point that we refine our materials and we apply. And I'll give you some quick tips on what to do with your materials in order to make the most of those applications. Then the last piece of the cycle is we have to review what happens. We track our applications, we track our conversations, and we see how are we doing. I'll give you some metrics to measure your job hunt against to tell you if how to see if your job hunt is on target or not. I'll just say right here on this slide, success in the job hunt is made of failure. You will not bat 1,000 on this thing. Even my clients that are really succeeding, doing everything right, they're getting callbacks 10% of the time, right? That's success here. And so often that can be quite a change in the way you were evaluated in your previous work where, we didn't have nearly the tolerance for failure or no's or setbacks. Where in the job hunt, it's par for the course. I worked with exactly one client who, we applied for one job together and she got it. But that's like that just isn't what happens. That's not how job hunt goes. And so you may have to continue the cycle. You may need to go around this merry-go-round a couple times. But at every stage, you're learning and adding your knowledge and refining those hypotheses to zero in on those things where you could really be a good fit. All right, I'll hand it to Dan here for some details.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Yeah, and starting to see some of the questions in the chat, so hopefully we can start addressing some of these as we go through this. In terms of, how do you approach this job search when not only your company, but the entire sector is in collapse, right? There's not these adjacent firms that like may happen if there's a typical layoff situation where you can just go right to that. This is an adaptive job search, and this is a really prime example of an adaptive job search. You have to go toward new ideas of what might be the right fit. And to do that, we start off with these 3 fit hypotheses. So why 3? If you're just focused on one perfect fit, it goes back to the job seeker types. There's nothing you can do about that beyond what you've already done, right? I want to work at the Gates Foundation in this particular role. You can do everything you can to get in. It might work, it might not, but there's nothing you can do if they're not hiring you for that role. Conversely, there might be 100 roles that you could do, and you're right, you could do them. But what are the ones where you're actually going to be able to get through the entire interview process and come out with a job on the other side? So this is narrowing it down to having 3 hypotheses, 3 of your best reasonable guesses based on everything you know so far about yourself, about the market, of where you could fit. And these take the form of a type of job title at a type of organization. So for example, a communications director, I've done a lot of communications work. I've done a lot of report writing, of external comms, of internal comms, whatever that looks like. I think a communications director is a title that I want to pursue, and I want to pursue that at a biotech startup. I come from a health background. I think this is going to be able to be applied in a biotech context, And this might be one of your hypotheses. Come up with three of these. It's okay if you don't have them to the degree of a specific job title and a specific org right away. That's what we call an inkling of these. But your goal is to get to having three of these operating at any given time so that as we go through the rest of this process, you refine these and you refine your materials for these, you start applying to these, and after a certain amount of time and a certain number of applications, you're going to be able to say, okay, this is a hypothesis that's getting me traction. I need to double down on this. This is one that's not. I need to change this. So keep that in mind as we go through. Then this is where networking comes into play. This is going to be a very different kind of networking for a lot of people than what you think networking is. And even if you don't think you fall into some of these other kinds of networking, you probably do just based on experience. So a lot of networking is transactional at heart. So the idea is I want to talk to people who have job openings and I want to be able to get my resume to them so that I can be considered for that job opening. And this is the kind of networking that happens when you find a job that you want to apply to on LinkedIn and you reach out to the hiring manager and you try to get them your resume and you try to tell them you'd be a great fit for it. And the problem with this kind of networking, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not morally wrong or anything like that. It's just not as effective as the kind of networking that we're going to talk about, which is based in discovering where you're going to be a good fit. Another kind of networking that people do is what we call relational networking. So again, nothing wrong with this, but this is the kind of coffee chat idea where at the end of it, you're just trying to really befriend someone. You're trying to ingratiate yourself with someone. You're asking them about, tell me about all of your backgrounds and your amazing experiences and everything. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's just not the most effective kind of networking. Instead, the networking that we teach, and this is if you had to do one single action after this, it would be to start doing this kind of networking with just one person for each of your hypotheses to start, is what we call validation networking. So the idea is to embrace your inner researcher, embrace your inner journalist, embrace your inner detective, be entirely non-transactional. This is strictly to get information about that market and your potential fit for it. So the communications director at a biotech startup, what you want to do is find somebody you know, preferably through your own loose connections or through somebody else that you know, and they can point you to this person. Find somebody who's in the biotech space in any capacity. Go and talk with them, and we're going to give you very specific questions to ask next. But the idea is that you're learning every single thing you can about that whole space. You're broadening out your search, you're deepening your search, and it's going to get you away from the reactive job posting comes up onto a job board, and then I'm going to apply to it, and then I'm going to reach out to somebody there and try to get an in. This flips the whole process and gets you talking to people to get a much better sense of, is this a good hypothesis for me? And what does this whole space look like? So these are some really specific questions. I'm gonna breeze through these because we're coming up on time. We want to save a little bit of time for questions. We're going to share all of these slides with you at the end. But you're asking, I think this is called communications director. What are some adjacent job titles? Does it seem like the right leveling for me? I've come across X, Y, and Z biotech companies. What other companies are out there that I should be looking at? What are some adjacent companies, some adjacent sectors to this? The skill sets, experience, education, what's really essential for this? What do I need to invest in, if anything? What do I not? Main problem or opportunity. So beyond what's listed in the job description, there's going to be a ton of stuff that the hiring team put in, that the recruiters put in, that HR put in, and what is the real underlying reason this job exists? Why are they paying somebody $150,000, $200,000, $100,000, whatever it is to do this kind of a role? What is that at the end of the day? And getting to that is really important. And then finally, please be brutally honest with me. So everyone meeting with you is going to be supportive generally. They're going to be people who want to help you. You're on the job search. The more you can get in terms of people who are closer to that space than you, their reaction to your materials, to your background, anything like that, that's really valuable feedback, and you want to be teeing them up to give that to you. Spencer, maybe you can take the materials.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So, and there was a question earlier about ChatGPT and sort of, how does AI come into all of this? And I know this may be hard to believe, but as far as I can tell, I talk to recruiters and headhunters literally every week. This is how I spend a great deal of time. Um, it is still a human on the other side of this thing reading your materials. It is not a robot. It is not ChatGPT is not making the hiring decisions. And at some point, even if there is a first round AI powered scan that mediates most hiring, all of this advice is going to track because it is about convincing the human who's going to hire you. Ultimately, someone has to make a positive decision to say yes to your materials. So this is who we're writing for. We're writing for a human being who's very busy, who has a lot of other materials to review, and has a really pressing problem that she needs to solve. Whether it's the recruiter who's just trying to get a good shortlist together, or it's the hiring manager who is trying to fill this role because they have an aching need on their team. So write simply for a very busy human. Um, I think folks tend to get bogged down sometimes in resume customization. If we have a good set of hypotheses, that creates the resume draft that can be the starting point without much. It doesn't need to be thoroughly customized for hours and hours for every single application that you put out. You should, and honestly, frankly, if you are heavily customizing, such that you have to do a top to bottom rewrite of your resume for each job that you're applying to, it tells me that you have not really targeted. There maybe isn't a good hypothesis yet, or one that is maybe not refined, right? So the resume should be framed and include the language that came up during your networking. In terms of what goes on the resume is a collection of stories. Stories are how humans take in information. What you're up against, again, is not some sort of like AI character limit keyword discovery thing that you need to beat. It is a human being who has limited ability to understand information. The average resume that I see when people come to me is filled with jargon and is incomprehensible. As a human being, and again, a guy who reads these for a living, I don't understand what they're trying to say because it doesn't make sense to an outside audience. In your last job, you learned to speak a particular lingo or jargon, which made a lot of sense to the people you worked with day to day and is almost incomprehensible to everybody else. So if you can pull back some of that jargon and put something together that a smart, 17-year-old could engage with, that tells compelling stories about your background, that is the pathway to a really good fit. If you want to use ChatGPT or other AI tools to write your materials, what I would do would be prompt it to ask you questions about your background. Prompt it to ask you to tell compelling career stories and put those out in whenever language feels natural to you. Put all the jargon in. And then the follow-up would be, hey, what if this is hard to understand for a general audience? And especially if you're making a pivot, right? You're going into the private sector. You're exploring different types of companies. We want to put it in language that those folks will understand, those folks will resonate with. And again, the number of applications that you need to put out is probably smaller than you think. You want to go out for those things where you really can absolutely dominate the process. If there are 500 other people who apply, you're still going to be candidate number one, two, or three because you're just so well matched for this. Okay. And again, I've got a resume template that I think is a really great starting point. We're going to share this with everybody who came to this. This is anyway a gift. A thank you for putting up with the talk. But I wouldn't worry too much about the materials until you've done the networking and you're sort of zeroed in on what am I looking for. Okay. I think we'll leave it there so we have time for this. Okay, this is really, really important. Please track your applications. So what did I apply to? What was the hypothesis? What happened? That's it. If you applied more than 30 days ago, count it as a rejection. And be pleasantly surprised with the few slow recruiting teams that might come back to you after 30 days. If you're getting 10% callbacks, that is, someone invites you to interview or go to the next step, take an assessment 10% of the time, you are likely on target. Your hypothesis may be right. If you have yet to apply to 30, we probably don't have enough out here to really say. Again, the 10% rule and the 30 rule, there's no magic in these. These are just like guideposts. Depending on your sector, depending on your seniority, depending on the type of roles you're applying for, there may be slightly more sensible guideposts, but these are the numbers that in a general audience with, people from all sorts of backgrounds, these would be the ones that I would ask you to keep in mind. So until you get to that 30 mark, keep applying. And if you've gotten to 30 and no one's called you back, your hypothesis is wrong. Like we've got to go back to the drawing board. Something isn't working. And again, that's not personal. That's not anything about you. And in this environment, it it is not a surprising outcome. A lot of folks struggle because, like we talked about at the very beginning of this, it can be hard to understand where your strengths actually line up. It, it You could keep going and you could apply to hundreds of jobs before you find a match and sort of stumble into what are you good at. This is an approach that will get you there with fewer shots on goal, fewer applications. But at any rate, we do have to refine the hypothesis if we're not seeing these numbers. If we are seeing these numbers, then the search becomes, how do I find more jobs like those ones that are calling me back? Um, but from the jump, just focus on validating the hypothesis and making sure that we're on the right track. Okay, Dan, I'm going to hand this back over to you.
Great, thanks, Spencer. So we've been trying to address some of the questions in the chat as we go. Apologies for the kind of brief responses that we've been doing. Again, as mentioned, definitely connect with us on LinkedIn. Shoot us all your questions. We're more than happy to go through them and answer specific ones. I'm still doing ongoing pro bono with folks too, so you can feel free to sign up for any of those sessions as well if you want some more particular guidance and advice on there. Let's wrap up Maribel's story quickly. So she went through this whole process. As mentioned, she got really close on some jobs. She even turned down an offer that she got that wasn't right for her, and that was a big moment in the search. And by the end of this, she ended up getting an offer for a great director role at a place where she was super respected, super valued. She ended up making more money. She's much happier as a result of this process. And we were with her for the whole process, and there were these huge ups and downs. There were a lot of small failures, small setbacks along the way. And our parting advice to you is really that this is normal, this is part of the process, and that it has to be part of this process. Thinking really creatively about what, and nobody knows an answer to this, right? But what is this emerging new social sector looking like? Being attuned to that, it's changing daily of what this looks like. We still firmly believe there's a world to do good with your work and to get paid well and to be treated as a professional doing it. We hope that you are able to keep that in mind, even if this next move might be going private sector for you. We hope that you eventually find your way back to this kind of impactful work that you've been doing, and there's no shame in wanting to take a step away from that for the time being. It's all going to be really personal. It's going to be really dependent on what's available for you and what's next. Networking to learn. Again, if there's one piece of advice that we want you to take away from this, it's networking is the job search at the beginning. This is the if you're looking to do one next thing after this, start talking to people who are closer to you, closer to your hypotheses than you are. Take advice from them on your materials, on your presentation, on your fit. Don't take advice on your fit for biotech from someone who's not closer to biotech than you. Just want to really put a point on that. That's probably the most helpful thing we can share with you all. And then finally, Spencer's written about this a lot, and I think it's a really important point here. There's no such thing as transferable skills in the sense that we think of them. There's not going to be a direct, I'm going to take what I can do and I'm going to put it to this whole new sector and be exactly at my same level and be doing the same exact thing. But there is room for transformation. You can take your skills, your expertise, your enthusiasm, your intelligence, your caring, and make this into your next chapter for you. Know that it's going to be a transformation. Know that it's going to look different, that it's going to change, that you're not holding on to exactly what you were doing before, and that you're going through this journey, going through this process, feeling these ups and downs, feeling these highs and lows. And we've seen this over and over again. We've seen this even in this current context, that you can come out better on the other side of this, and we hope that all for you. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Again, reach out to us with all these. We know we had to cut this short. And thanks to the SID-US team for hosting us. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Spencer and Dan. I do know that there is a question in here just quickly. I know we have just a couple minutes, but
Yeah.
Andrea writes, can we write to one of you with our hypotheses and see if they're the right according to our current CV? That's one question. Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah,
Put you on the
happy to hear
spot.
from folks. Folks can follow up with either Dan or me on LinkedIn. You can schedule pro bono time with Dan. He's still got slots on his calendar, and I'm happy to chat with folks via LinkedIn. Please follow up.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I would encourage you all to connect with them on LinkedIn. This was real. I mean, this was very, very useful for me. And I really, that target, how you have the target. I was just telling somebody at one of our, we had a young professionals happy hour earlier this week, and telling them that in my life, when I've looked for jobs, I always collect the data, right? I just keep track of everything. And the percentages of, from when I first started in my career out of grad school to see like coming to SID, the percentages of callbacks and offers were the same. They were totally the same. I mean, in terms of percentages, and that shocked me, So, but it was great because it was around 10%. And like I was thinking about it, oh yeah, it is about 10%. So, that makes me hopeful. I mean, but I do know, like for me, the kinds of jobs that I really like to do and what I want to do. So I think this guidance and doing these hypotheses actually is very useful, especially as you move into, you're trying, because most of us have to move into a new sector, or not a new sector, well, potentially. Anyway, that said, thank you again for all your advice and presenting today. Thank you to everyone that joined us. And we did put, I think Dan may have put in the Dan from the SID team put the link to the survey, maybe. If not, he'll put it in just a second. But just want to remind you of two events. The first one, as I'd mentioned earlier, is next Monday. That is an institutional member event only. So it really is geared for C-suite staff with institutional members. If you don't know if you're a member or an institutional member, feel free to reach out to us. And then second is a public event, so it's open to everyone, which is kind of sort of along the lines of adapting to today's event. And we will be having speakers talk about sort of their journey, some who've had to pivot, some who've had to just kind of adjust and change given everything that's happening in international development. So we encourage you to join us for that event as well. And then finally, please fill out the survey. We will send the slides and the recording to everyone that registered. And thank you again. And if you have any questions about SID-US or interested in learning more and membership, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you again, Spencer and Dan, for being here. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much, Julie. Thanks, everyone.